Yes on that. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the third and concluding day of our International Conference on Philosophical Counseling, sponsored by ICPR and organized by the Department of Philosophy and Department of Education, Delhi University. We are so pleased, so humbled, and so honored to see everyone present here for all 3 days. And this day, we will be talking more about debates. The conference was divided into 3 themes: concepts, methods, and debates in philosophical counseling. So, this is the day when we go a little bit into more detail about the debates surrounding philosophical counseling. And for that, we have our first session in which we have an illustrious panel waiting for us. And Dr. Lee Zhang from China will introduce the panel and conduct the session. So I will introduce Professor Lee Zhang for everyone present here. She's PhD and Associate Professor at the Philosophy Department, Shandong Normal University, and Head of the Philosophical Counseling Research and Practice Center. She's a visiting scholar at the City College of New York, and she has a membership of APPA and APPA certificate. Her doctoral dissertation was on philosophical counseling as practical wisdom, focused on the nature of the discipline, 2015, and it was supervised by Professor Fu Yongjung at Shandong University. And she has been taking a course for undergraduate students on philosophical counseling since 2020, and a course for graduate students since 2019 on the CECAPFI. And she also supervised one MA student whose research is in the area of philosophical practice. She's heading a national project about philosophical counseling, which is on the research and theory and practice of Chinese philosophy and philosophical counseling. And she is here with us. And we are so privileged that she has taken time from her busy schedule, and she has come and joined her in this, venture of academic solidarity that all international speakers have contributed to. So we are really looking forward to this session. Speakers may have 20 minutes to speak, and then we will have a joint question and answer round at the end. All the participants or attendees are encouraged to send their questions on chat. And after the speakers are done with their presentations, we will highlight those questions. If you wish to ask your questions in video format, you may raise your hands. And again, after the end of both presentations, we will bring you in on video format. So we are looking forward to both your presentations, sir and ma'am. Over to you, Dr. Lee Zhang, please.
Thank you. Thanks to Charu for introducing me to this conference. I'm very honored by and very grateful to Gala. He invited me to take part in this conference and be the chair in the following session. In this session, we have 2 presentations, Professor Sumaicher and Dr. Lekshmi. Welcome, both of you. Now, I would like to invite Professor Sumaicher and introduce him to you briefly. Professor Sumaicher is General Director, co-founder and trainer at Educational Center for Autonomous Creation in Philosophical Practices, with seats in Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, and Italy. He also is the president of the Mexican Association of Philosophical Counseling. Today, Professor Sumaicher will share with us his topic, Philosophy, the Heartbeat of Bodies. This topic seems very interesting, and I'm looking forward to listening to. Welcome, Dr. Sumaicher.
Thanks a lot, Professor Zhang, for your introduction. I'm really happy to be here with you and say that really believe that it's a wonderful conference you are developing. I am really happy when I received for the first time the program and to have the opportunity to see all those friends that are here participating with Professor Balaganapati. And all of you. So the presentation I want to give is some really important perspective that I was developing for a long time, that is centered in this question: how philosophy can be part of our lives, of all the acts we do, not only as a rational content that is just linked or is that we are trying to connect with what we do, but something that is inside what we do. So if it's possible, I will put presentation. Can you see the presentation?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So I will start. First, I want to make a resume. Firstly, we will give a context of this topic, then the basis of philosophy of the human heartbeat, what basis it has, what does the philosophy of the human heartbeat contain, then the sense of transcendence, the accidental and the philosophical. Those categories are really important for me to define and to find this point I am looking for. After we will see the accidental, then the philosophical itself, and to finish applications in philosophical practice. That is something I think really important for us. So to start with the context, we can say a lot of things about our context, but we can say at least that our societies have been exempt from philosophical, authentic and committed thought and action, that we live in societies of isolation and individualization, as Byung-Chul Han said, and also that in philosophy we have inherited a conceptual, linguistic, individual, and mainly theoretical scheme that dissociates between reason and the body and emotion. For the third thing is that people and societies today seek and need to build their own philosophical senses, especially with this COVID situation. The people, the societies, we were working a lot in the COVID-19 team philosophically with different groups, and we really consider that in this moment people and societies need philosophy. So this philosophy of the human heartbeat is based on four platforms, four in theoretical context. The first is phenomenology, that is based on Merleau-Ponty, Husserl, and David de Breton. The second is bioepistemology, that is based in a fantastic Chilean thinker, that is Humberto Maturana, and also Antonio Damasio. They are thinking on an epistemology that is based on our biology, based on life. We will speak about it in some moment. The third is a systemic and synergic understanding. And this third base is connecting different authors, very different authors, like Wittgenstein, especially the second Wittgenstein, Mauricio Beuchot, that is a fantastic Mexican thinker that speak about, he is based on the analogical thinking, based on Gadamer, also Kurt Lewin for the systemic understanding of what we do, and also Donald Davidson, that is a really different thinker of North America. So this is a really special combination that was really useful for me to construct an understanding that can have the details and the characteristic, the specifically concepts that I need to do this. The fourth part is philosophical practice, that is based in different colleagues like Matthew Lippmann and Sharp, and also Gerd Achenbach and others. To start with the first, phenomenology, some fundamental notions that I am using in this moment, the idea of Husserl, of the world of life. This is an idea that Husserl presented in his last work, and the total possession of experience. This is really important. About David Le Breton, that is a really interesting phenomenological approach, anthropological and phenomenological approach to the senses. He speaks about unavoidable consideration of the intentionality. That is a really classical thing in phenomenology, the intentionality. And the third part, the third point is about the that the body expresses the total reality, that Merleau-Ponty expressed the physiognomy of data. This is a really wonderful concept that I am using. All the information we could acquire have a physiognomy. So this is the first base. The second, the bioepistemology, is linked. Some of his concepts are resorting to our animal origin to explain ourselves, as Nietzsche did. So I am taking a lot of things of Nietzsche. Nietzsche is a wonderful philosopher to think the body. The structural determinism. This is an interesting concept of Umberto Maturana. So we have some kind of determinism because we have some biology, some specifications of our corporal developing. So those characteristics are some kind of determinism that is not a total determinism. So this is an important consideration of our bodies that is coming in this case from Umberto Maturana. Genealogical understanding of our actions, so this is important too, and corporal and emotional state as the foundation of rationality. This is maybe the main thesis of Antonio Damasio, that our rationality without emotions and without the body is just nothing, and it's also what, for example, Adorno and Horkheimer were criticizing of our actual world, that rationality doesn't have a guide, no? And Damasio say, okay, we cannot have a guide without emotions and body. The third base is a systemic synergic understanding. In this base, I can point out some different things that are important for me. First, acts and processes that acquire constitution from their sense. This is something that I am keeping from Kurt Lewin, that was really interesting psychologist, but also philosopher of the last century. Also, that you cannot impose a sense outside a given reality. This is from Wittgenstein, from the second Wittgenstein, as I said, because this system of categories are not to impose something to reality. Firstly, is to understand what we are developing, what are we creating with philosophy, with the others, for example, in a philosophical practice, and then to can guide with more understanding, with more categories, with more intelligence, and maybe wisdom, those creations, those acts and processes we are performing with the other. The third point is a systemic analogical tendency of sense. This is important because, as I told in the beginning, if we are creating a philosophical sense in the acts and processes we perform, we need to understand where it's going. I think that Pierre Grimes spoke about some of these things in the beginning of this conference. So we need to understand these tendencies with an analogical comprehension, because these tendencies are with the other, are with the groups, are with the people with we are working in philosophical practice. So we are joining the intentions and the tendencies. And for this, it's important a conception of objectivity that I am taking from Donald Davidson. There is a wonderful conception he has of that I consider keeping the ideas from Davidson, that objectivity is conformed of subjectivity, intersubjectivity, and also the world. And this is the idea, the epistemological idea of Davidson, that we don't need to renounce to one of those paradigms, and we can join them together and have them at the same time, the subjectivity, the intersubjectivity, and what I like to call, taking the Foucault idea, materiality of the world. That this is part of the epistemology I am using in this construction. So the fourth part, the fourth base, is the philosophical practice. And well, here I took some quotation that I will read, saying, the large diffusion and the enhancement of philosophical practice is both a presuppose of the peaceful coexistence and an instrument to produce it. Therefore, we philosophical practitioners are hoping such enhancement and diffusion, and we are appealing to all institutions and governments to promote philosophical practice at their citizens in the whole world. This is a phrase that I took from the International Declaration for Cooperation, Peace and Philosophy. We will have it really soon. This is a proposal that we developed with different colleagues. We perform it through CECAPFI International, and we invited important philosophers from 10 countries: Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia, Mexico, United States, Spain, Italy, Germany, Russia, and Japan. We have to choose some countries of the world. And we asked 5 important thinkers of those countries to send us ideas to perform, to create this declaration. Then we did pre-declarations per country, and after a general declarations that we will have it, and obviously we will share with you if you want. And this is a really interesting text, really useful for this epoch of crisis, isolation, fear, and all the things that I am sure that you know. So, well, this is about philosophical practice, because the international declaration also speak about philosophical practice, and also philosophical practice is part of the construct I did. So some of his concepts that I'm taking is that philosophizing involves our identities and constructing ourselves. The idea of Bildung that Herrachenbach take really well. The subject of the world can philosophize based on their own resources and abilities. This idea is taken from Lippmann and Sharp, and that philosophizing is a right and a human need. This idea of that UNESCO is promoting, we really have to use in philosophy and also in philosophical practices argument, because UNESCO in the book Philosophy School of Freedom is saying that philosophy is a right. No? So also the Constitution of Mexico now having the 3rd article, the philosophy as a right. We achieved in the philosophical community, especially for the Observatorio Filosófico de México, the Philosophical Observatory of Mexico, we achieved to put the philosophy in the Constitution of Mexico. So we have to use this argument that philosophy is right. So this is part of what I take. So with those bases, this philosophy of the human heartbeat contains different things. It's a very big theory with a lot of paths, I will try to present one of them in the time I have, at least some of the main ideas, and after to leave time to the question. The first is that a broad but definite categorical framework. The second is the identification of three great dimensions of the sense, that is kind of a color that the acts we perform can have. So the acts we perform can have a philosophical sense itself. This is one of the theses I am working on. And the third is the integration and interrelation of our expressions from the articulate and systemic logic. Dismembering all ontology of language as the center of the understanding of what we are. This is really long theme to speak. We can speak in another moment about it, but we speak about the interrelation of what we are and what we do. And the fourth is the consideration of philosophy as an expansive palpitation, as part of the evolution of the life of the subjects, understanding it as commitment, identity, depth, and all these things are important for me. If we see the sense, if we see these three great dimensions of the sense, as I was saying, as the color, as the tendency or act have, they can be explained in three dimensions. The first is the opening dimension, that is composed by the critical and the creative. The second is the transfer dimension, that is composed with the active and receptive trend. And the third is dimension of transcendence, that include philosophical and accidental. The philosophical and the accidental can be part of what we do. Let's see how can be possible. So we have these two possibilities, these two tendencies. If we see something of the accidental, for example, the accidental responds to a differentiated sense of any act or process, as Husserl liked to mention. This sense is differentiated in everything we perform, in the phenomenology of what we do in life. The accidental constitution of the sense of an act or process is related to the way in which it develops and functions, and can be identified by its eventual nature. So it's important, this eventual nature, and also that there is no a priori way to determine if this or that act or process responds to this quality. So this construction is pushing us to see the reality, to go to the reality and to see how it is. The accidental can be identified at the moment when it can be easily replaced by something else similar. It produced few consequences or inferences. I am taking the idea of inferences of John Dewey. In a really good book of John Dewey, that is How We Think, you can find the concept of inferences as the jump of a thought, a new thought that is emerging, a new act that emerges from another act. I consider that this is the inference. So in general, the accidental produce few consequences, few inferences, and can be associated with certain automatic habits. So I can jump this quotation. Promotes short-lived processes. They are not usually remembered. We don't even try to, because little things in life, the accidental is the little things and has a tendency towards death. Every time an act or process is become accidental, it tends to turn off. There is never an act completely accidental because we are alive, you know? we are alive. So also there is no absolute polarity. We have different degrees in the accidental and in the philosophical tendency of acts and processes. We have a value, there is a value of the accidental, because if things couldn't be accidental and short in duration or living would become like a computer in a state of overload. The accidental can minimize the most terrible things. And wisdom, in part, consists in rendering insignificant the great tragedies. So we can conclude that it's necessary to turn accidental acts and processes. So let's see some characteristics of the other tendency that our acts and processes can have, that is the philosophical. So how can it work? The philosophical, and I don't know how I am in time, but if I don't have too much time, I can leave the other part for the questions. I want to read this short paragraph about the philosophical, at least to have an idea. The philosophical is objectively part of the sense of an act. The philosophical sense can characterize any act and process of those that we carry out in our lives, in our stories in the world, where they are thoughts or action, whether or not they involve language, argumentation, or the opening of infancy of questioning. Taking a glass can be a philosophical act, as well as saying, stop it. Everything depends on the constitution of those realizations. Philosophical processes are transcendent, and there now I am taking the idea of transcendency of Gabriel Marcel, that is a really interesting phenomenology. They cannot be easily replaced by other acts and processes. The large numbers of acts that proliferate from the philosophical quality of meaning are revealed as extension and magnitude. The magnitude refers to the importance of the inalienable and the extension to the long term. So it's important to point out that, for example, you can see here that having a plant is different to having a child. Buy the food for dinner is different to buy a house. Philosophical acts and processes are normally linked or connected with the identity of the subjectivity. This is also really important because this transcendency they have, this magnitude they have, imply that we are inside. Our identity is performing in those acts and processes. So I don't know how I am with the time.
Yeah, probably you have 2 more minutes.
Okay, thanks so much. So the expansion of philosophy is also observed in the nervous system. We have some neuroscientists that explain it, Tohar and Marshall, and they researched about big neurological processes that can happen in ourselves. So we can see them in our body. They are not restricted to that. They are not just that, but we can see as those expressions in our body too. They are synergistically part of something. The philosophical acts are part of something bigger because they are part of what we are. Sometimes the people don't know too much about themselves. For that reason, they go to the philosophical practitioner. They go to have a philosophical counseling. What we do, because I think I cannot finish the presentation, that we do in philosophical practice is to try to find where those philosophical senses or where those philosophical potentialities can be and touch those points. But those points are part of the subjectivity, are part of the center of the subjectivity. And to finish, I can say that philosophy is difficult to achieve because it implies making multiple relationships with what exists and with what we are. It's not enough to want to be ethical. It's not enough to read Kant ethics. It's not enough to want to be a good person with the other. We have to be this. We have to perform all those acts and processes that include emotions, sensations, memories, acting in the world, perceptions, and all those interconnections. Is difficult to go, to move, to be in the wave of those of this big movement that we can call philosophy. So I want to finish with this Nichiren Daishonin phrase that was a Japanese philosopher. He said, "As accepting is easy, but continuing is difficult." And this happened with philosophy, and this is what we work also in philosophical practice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sumaicher. Thank you so much for giving us so excellent, creative presentation. Thank you. Bala, Q&A round after two presentation.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Time for the next presentation from Dr. Lekshmi. I would like to invite Dr. Lekshmi and introduce her to you briefly. Dr. Lekshmi is presently working as Associate Professor of Philosophy at the University of Kerala. She was heading the Department of Philosophy. Her thrust areas include Vedanta, analytical philosophy, and the continental tradition. She has completed 2 research projects funded by UGC. She has co-edited and published a book. She has published articles in international and national journals. Today, Dr. Lekshmi will share with us her topic. Is there a method to do philosophical practice? A discussion based on the Bhagavad-Gita. This topic seems very interesting and creative, and I'm looking forward to listen to. Now, welcome Dr. Lekshmi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sang Lizeng, for the kind introduction given to me. Thank you very much. And at the outset, let me congratulate Dr. Balaganapati, Professor of Philosophy, University of Delhi, and his entire team, of course, Dr. Vikas and his colleagues and everyone, for conducting such a beautiful international conference on philosophical counseling, and also for inviting me to present a paper on this wonderful international conference. So first of all, let me give a brief introduction to the paper which I have written. So what I intend to do in this very short presentation of about 15 to 20 minutes, I would like to take up the question whether there is a proper method or a specific method for practicing philosophy. And I would like to take up that along the lines of Bhagavad-Gita. And Bhagavad-Gita, of course, is an important text in the Indian scriptural tradition. And though it is considered to be a text of the Indian tradition, we can see that the message of the Gita is in fact universal in its scope. And it's a gospel with an optimistic outlook and conserving metaphysics. And it is in fact for everyone and for all times, and especially in times of crisis. We can say when the mind of a human person is full of conflicts and torn by the, I should say, the dilemma of duties, ethical dilemma of duties. In fact, one can turn to Bhagavad-Gita for light and guidance. I would like to quote the words of Abraham Lincoln, who once said that Gita is the best gift God has ever given to humanity. unquote. So with this brief introduction to Bhagavad-Gita, let me also present the context or the stage set by the author of this great work, Vyasa, in presenting the theme of the Bhagavad-Gita, because then only I can come to the context in which a philosophical practice can be undertaken, and also coming to the methodologies adopted in that particular discourse. So that the Gita gives certain fundamental teachings relating to life, which are the life of a person, is clear in fact from the very stage set by the author Vyasa in presenting the theme. The whole teachings were delivered in the battlefield by the Lord Krishna to Arjuna, another character, and Arjuna is the person who represents the common man. So the whole teachings were delivered in fact only in the battlefield. And why, the question why the battlefield was being selected by the author. So it represents activism, or a symbol of activism, I can say. So here one need not worry about the, in fact, the historical happenings of that particular story or etc. But what we are interested in is only the philosophical underpinnings of the entire thing. So this paper is, in fact, an attempt to present a few contexts that are good lessons for doing philosophical practice. So what I have tried to do is, first, I would like to take the opening note of the Bhagavad-Gita, which is in fact a state of, speaks about the state of despondence of a human person. And here it is presented through Arjuna only. And so Arjuna, the great hero, the great warrior, loses his strength of mind and he stands dejected in the battlefield. So he's caught up with the mental weakness whereby his bows fall down and the body starts shivering. And in fact, here comes the Lord Krishna to help Arjuna to regain his mental strength, power of self-confidence, and the boldness to face life. And I would like to say that the whole of the entire treatise of Bhagavad Gita, that's the 700 verses of the Bhagavad Gita, are in fact great lessons on philosophical practice. So whether one would like to address Bhagavad Gita as a psychological treatise or a philosophical treatise is much debatable, I believe. But personally speaking, I would like to say that it's a philosophical treatise. So the introductory part of the Gita presents a live picture of a person who is in a psychologically fallen state and needs help. Hence, the context of Gita is much appropriate for philosophical practice. It's not merely addressing a psychological distress, but a problem which is rooted in philosophical dilemma. Now, the question is, what is that philosophical dilemma which is faced by this particular human person named Arjuna? The philosophical dilemma involves the ethical decision making between right and wrong. Now, for any person, any human person, this kind of a context can come at any point of a time in one's life. So in this ethical dilemma that is to be taken into account when we read the Gita as a model for philosophical counseling. Now, what type of a methodology the other person can take? Now, how can Lord Krishna help a person who is in such a mentally fallen state? So in philosophical counseling, the method adopted is very significant, you can say, or in philosophical practice, I would like to say. So unlike psychological counseling, which has fixed tools for practice, philosophical practice does not prescribe any specific method for practice. It depends on each case and is decided by the person after making thorough analysis of each and every case individually. That's the main the point of my argument in this particular paper. So this charm and beauty of the Gita, it lies in the methodology adopted by the Lord Krishna. So in the whole event of these happenings, Krishna enters into a lengthy dialogue with Arjuna, and after the Maurya encountered by Arjuna, not giving an immediate solution to the problem. So when a person approaches a philosopher for some kind of an advice, it's the question is whether the philosopher has to give an immediate solution to the person who is seeking help, or whether he has to see that the other finds a solution of his own, or whether he has in fact, if I can use the term, a method of self-correction, whether he will adopt or not. So here, Arjuna, so the philosopher Krishna, he wants to make Arjuna understand and rationalize the situation, and then come out of the dilemma with a solution of his own. Now, this is evident only towards the end of the conversation, where Arjuna finds he's free and is to make a choice of his own. So I would like to explicate this situation as one of existential. This is a perfect example for an existential situation. One should face any form of crisis boldly, use his or her own freedom and choice, which will lead to a course of action. Now, only at that moment, the individual does exist as maybe what Sartre says. And so it's here that the distinction between being in itself and being for itself becomes pertinent. So for every choice of one's own, one enjoys freedom, but where he or she also finds oneself responsible. So this is exactly the beauty of a philosophical practice, I believe. And this is exactly the beauty of the Gita, because the whole treatise, we can see, and nowhere the philosopher, Krishna, never gives any immediate solution, but only he makes the other understand the situation, make him rationalize, make him think, and make him come out with his own solutions only. And at the end of the everything, it is set Yatha Ichchasi Kathata Guru in Sanskrit, which when translated into English means do as you like or as you please. So that kind of a freedom is being given to the person who is approaching for help. And there really lies the significance of that methodology that is adopted in the Gita. So this model of the method of self-correction is highly significant in the context of any philosophical practice, I personally believe. And then but at the same time, what is the role of the philosopher? Of course, how he can help the other. So whether he has to make some categorical pronouncements, or he has to be simply a merely a passive listener, what exactly should be the stand of the philosopher? So here it is interesting to see that the Gita presents some contradictory models. In the another context of the Gita, one can see how liberal Krishna is in his interactions with Arjuna. But at times he is also making some strong pronouncements to Arjuna. So they sound very categorical and commanding in tone and attitude. This is a context when one clearly understands the problem faced by a mentally weak person and how an imperative assertion will make effective changes in the other. So when the other person is so weak, maybe the philosopher has to make some strong pronouncements, because then that strong pronouncements, or which comes as if like commands or some imperatives, so that can effectively bring some changes in the person who is seeking help. So, and here, in fact, Krishna takes up that particular method. So, and again, Krishna could see the root cause of Arjuna's moral dilemma, and that is born out of mental weakness and is being caused by the overpowering of emotions. So in such a situation, some strong pronouncements can help the other to come out of this weakness. So it is interesting to see how Gita adopts two entirely different models, I should say, by which one can, in fact, practice philosophy in the day-to-day situations of life. Then another enriching message of, or the method of Gita is how to enrich our mind or the person who is mentally weak with the positive thoughts. So Gita presents simple methods of philosophical practice, I can say. So though it seems to be simple, it can be one of the most effective ways for philosophical practice. So this is effectively brought out through conversational methods. So that can be another, because I think that is the most effective method. So whether it is the Indian tradition or it is the Western tradition, always one can see that dialogues or conversation right from the beginning of the Socratic tradition, or here if we come to the Indian tradition, the Upanishads also you take, we can see conversation or dialogues are the effective tools or the methods used by any philosopher. So that is also being used here in Bhagavad-Gita. So constant interactions with the person who is affected, that is an integral part of philosophical practice. So in Gita also, Krishna repeatedly exhorts Arjuna to be self-aware, and awareness that will help to boost self-confidence in the affected party. And it is in this context that Gita is, we can say it is rooted in spirituality, because self-confidence spontaneously comes out of the firm inward conviction that one is the infinite spiritual entity or spiritual being. So that is in fact the central message of Gita, and that is something which in fact supplies one with a great strength, confidence, and that's a big source of inspiration, I can say. Now, fear and weakness, according to the Upanishads and the Gita, come only when one forgets about one's real nature, because the real nature of man is that source of infinite strength and possibility. So infinite are the possibilities of man. So that is really the exhaustion of the Indian philosophical tradition. And so when one gets mentally weak, one has to remind oneself of one's real nature. That is, one has to be constantly aware that one is the Atman or the self encased in this body. So when one identifies oneself with the body mind, then one finds oneself as limited and finite. Now, this is one of the beautiful archetypes presented by the Gita, I would say, for a philosophical practice. Now, the above lesson of the Gita is not only for the mentally weak persons, I would like to add, but for anyone. Because when such a message comes from a great tradition like the Gita, it is much inspiring, and here a more holistic approach to the human personality is taken into consideration that makes the context of philosophical practice very significant. Then another important method or message given by archetype given by the Gita is how to conquer the overpowering overpowering of emotions. Because many of the affected situations may be due to the overpowering of emotions. So, and in fact, that may lead to a morally dilemmatic situations. Because that causes some sort of emotional disturbances. Now, the Gita takes Buddhi Yoga as an archetype for philosophical practice. Now, what is this Buddhi Yoga? The term Buddhi stands for intellect, I can say. So here, to be firmly established in Buddhi or intellect means to see that the rational part of the human personality is taking precedence over the emotional part. So when a person identifies oneself as the body mind, he or she develops egoism and sense of I and mine. So this will lead to attachments and henceforth a state of emotional overpowering. But a human being has the supreme power of managing one's emotions to see that he or she is logical and irrational and rational. So once a person becomes logical and rational, emotional overpowering can never happen. And this is in fact yet another archetype presented by Bhagavad-Gita for beautiful philosophical practice. I can say then another important model is how to get this kind of emotional balance, or I would like to say the way to inner homeostasis, I can say. So one of the important contributions of the Upanishads and the Gita is the way of attaining mental equipoise, because that is really the point where one gets a perfect balance of one's life or one's life situations, I can say. So the Gita defines yoga as samatvam or mental equipoise. So so the way suggested to attain such a state are shama and dhamma. Again, use certain Sanskrit terms, but I will, of course, give the translations of which are Shama stands for control of mind and Dhamma for the control of sense organs. So overpowering of emotions occur when the mind is in association with the senses and which gets strong hold over the intellect. So when it happens, one may fall into irrational ways of behavior. So when the intellect or the rational, yes, sir, I will conclude within a few minutes. Yes, thank you, sir. So what will happen is the rational part will take the lead and the person can be very wise in his choices and actions. So these are all some of the archetypes which I wanted to present for an effective philosophical practice. So I once again thank all the organizers and thank the chair for giving me such a wonderful opportunity to present my ideas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lekshmi. Dr. Lekshmi gave us excellent corrective presentation. Thank you again. Next, it's time to Q&A round. 20 minutes, please.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, kindly raise your hand and we'll put your video in the panel so you can ask your question over video. If for some reason you do not wish to come on camera, you can also send your questions on chat. Our panel presented very illustrious and very insightful papers, so we are sure you have many questions. And if you have compiled your thoughts, we are waiting to hear them.
Probably before people gather their thoughts, let me just briefly thank both the presenters especially. David, it's wonderful to see that there is something called the International Declaration of Cooperation, Peace and Philosophy that is coming up. You know, that's the great effort on the part of other friends who probably have mooted this idea, and we would be very happy to join such kind of a movement, because world has recognized the importance of philosophy and philosophical practice, especially in the pandemic times, and we all have to respond to that. You know, when people for a long time lamented that world is not recognizing the importance of philosophy, but now world has recognized the importance of philosophy, and it is our duty, you know, being in the academia, to respond to the call of the humanity and make our own contributions. So thank you so much for your efforts, and also your very intriguing presentation, you know, bringing out 4 labels. One is a phenomenological contribution and also bioepistemology. You know, this is what basically intrigued me to go into it. Probably I would look forward to read something about this bioepistemological perspective that you are talking about, and then systemic synergic understanding, which really seems to be like a major contribution towards philosophical practice. Thank you so much for these thoughts. And also, Lekshmi, you have presented a wonderful way the importance of the text of Bhagavad-Gita. In fact, last 2 days, we have been listening to debates on whether Bhagavad-Gita can be taken as a text of philosophical counseling at all, because it is not that we have to accept everything. The very label that we have given to the conference of this particular day is debating. So people have debated, saying that some people have argued that Gita cannot be a philosophical counseling text, because here Lord argues, saying that if you're not able to do anything, mamekam saranam vraja. So you become like you take recourse to me so that I can protect you. So if a philosophical counselor says that, then can it be considered to be philosophical counseling was a kind of a question that has come forward. But I see Michael raising his hand. Probably Michael, please go ahead. Thank you.
And also there is a question in the chat, Professor Bala.
Yeah.
Would you
Charu?
like to respond to that first? Oh, well.
Yes, so please go ahead, please.
Okay, I'll just go ahead. Thank you both for your talks. I too had a bit of a question about the Gita, but I haven't quite formulated it yet. I guess what I would ask is roughly, I find that the Gita useful for, you know, all sorts of spiritual advice, certainly, and profound book that it is, and but to look at it closely, I in the context, like one gets into details about the Sankhya philosophy, in particular the theory of gunas at the end, and these are, I think, are like culturally sort of specific and hard. I think the philosophy in some sense is going away from that. At least if, you know, one model of philosophy is to learn different theories and maybe learn Sankhya and these different theories and how to do this work. But another idea is not to, you know, to take one of those theories as the truth in some sense. So that's my question about that. It was a little bit longer and not what I wanted, but I just wanted to say something to David too, very briefly. And it had to do with your reference to, well, the whole Maturana and biological thing, but in particular, it was Damasio that I wanted to talk about. And it's partly because I ended up talking about Damasio a certain amount in one of the essays in my book that's coming out called How to Play Philosophy. And what about exactly this kind of connection of reason and feeling. And he distinguishes three kinds of feeling there. One of them is he calls background feelings. And it seems to me that they are very, they're very similar the way he describes them to what the Buddha calls the Vedanas, the sensations on the body that you look at doing the body scan kind of thing. So what I was able, it was in an essay on stress, but the connection between philosophy and meditation, like meditation, a body scan is not philosophy somehow, but nevertheless, it's sort of a philosophically rich thing to do and philosophically productive thing to do. So the relation of like silent meditation and philosophy is connected, you know, very much with this issue, like the broader issues in your talk about making philosophy, understanding philosophy, even in mute things we do and in actions and so on. So I just wanted to reference that. I found something similar maybe in him to you. So I'll leave it to you to respond, and maybe you can both respond. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Professor Michelle, for your comment. And what I would like to say is that my attempt was to present some models or archetypes for philosophical practice. So I personally believe each and every tradition or each and every culture has peculiar models, and whatever one finds to be correct, one can, or whatever one finds to be comfortable, that model one can take. And in fact, and about the role of meditation, I believe meditation, in fact, is when we speak from the Indian philosophical tradition or the Eastern traditional perspectives, meditation, we can't say it is religious, but that also comes at a part of philosophical doing, because here we can't make some sort of a, I can say, some sort of a what to take compartmentalization like this is body, this is mind or something like, because a human person is an integrated personality where meditation in fact helps us to bring the best out of a person. Okay, thank you, Michelle, because I don't want to take much of the time. Okay.
I want to say something brief also. Thanks, Michael, for your comment and also for the question that we have in the chat. I will try to respond to them, taking what you said about philosophy and meditation. I think that is really relevant, specifically in this Congress that is based in India, right? Country that developed all those types of meditations, all the yogas and all the all those that I believe they are philosophical methods itself, because nowadays we don't we cannot sustain the paradigm that say that philosophy started in the ancient Greece. Philosophy is part of the cultures, of the ideas of the cultures, and obviously India has an incredible, a really incredible philosophy. So we can, for my conception at least, consider that when we are performing deep acts inside the silent meditation that you mentioned, Michael, and also about the question that was in the chat about the religious thing. So when we are performing, at least in my point of view, acts and processes that are part of our identity, of what we can consider what we are, of those things that are going through ourselves, connecting ourselves with something else that we are performing too. This can be called philosophy. So I don't have any problem to consider philosophy in the acts we do. We are in the time we are thinking, and in the time we are not thinking, if those acts are part of the root of what we are, these deep feelings you refer of Damasio, that I think that are these base feelings. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sumaicher. Dr. Lee Zhang, with your permission, may we close the session because we have parallel presentations as well. We have 5 parallel sessions waiting for us. So with your permission.
My question has not been taken up. It was in the chat box. May I ask Dr. Lekshmi?
Sure, sir. Maybe, and ma'am, if you could kindly keep it brief because we have 5 more parallel sessions.
You can read it.
Yes.
My question.
Okay. I think if it was a Buddha or a Charvaka in place of Krishna, that is the question which you have raised, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
am I right, sir? Yes.
Yes. And
okay.
When you thoughts about the cultural tradition, they belong to the same cultural tradition. That is also
Okay. That's a very wonderful question, I should say, and I can be brief in my answer to response to
and
that.
Session.
Okay. Can I, Ms. Lizeng?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So, if in place of Krishna, if there was a Buddha also, see, I don't find any difference between these two personalities, because I am, though I was taking Krishna, I was just referring to him as a philosopher. So in my eye, both Buddha and Krishna, they are all philosophers. So they can really give advice to a person. Okay, it can be even if it can be a Charvaka, if a person who is can stand in that particular position, and so of course Gita is one particular model, the Charvaga who doesn't believe in a spirit or who doesn't believe in a self, maybe he can come up with another archetype or another archetype or a model. And in fact, that is the very crux of my paper, because where I tried to say that we don't need to be too strict in our models for philosophical practice, and we can have as many models for philosophical, just like as Wittgenstein said, language is the very game of life. So I believe that in philosophical practice also. So thank you, Professor, for the very wonderful question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lekshmi. Dr. Zhang, any final comments from you? And then we will close the session. You are on mute, Dr. Zhang.
Oh, okay. It's the end session. Thank you all. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zhang, for being with us here and sharing this session. Thank you once again to Dr. Lekshmi and Dr. Sumaicher for your wonderful presentations. And we actually have a lot more questions in chat, but unfortunately, due to the paucity of time and a very strict schedule that we have to follow, so we will be sending these questions to you over email, and maybe you can respond to them, and we will put that Google Doc on our website so that everyone can benefit from your insight. Thank you once again, Dr. Lekshmi and Dr. Sumaicher, for your presentations, for coming here, for being a part of this historic movement in India, where such a conference is being held for the first time on this theme. And we are so happy that you've contributed your energy to this endeavor. Thank you once again. Thank you, Dr. Zhang. Thank you, Dr. Lekshmi. Thank you, Dr. Sumaicher. On behalf of the entire organizing committee, a big thank you to all of you.